People have been waiting for 20 minutes.
Mm?
People have been waiting for 20 minutes to tune in.
Silence your phone. Your phone, silence your phone.
My phone, what?
Put it on silent mode. That your phone is still ringing.
Yeah. Phone's on silent mode.
Alright, I'm bringing you in.
Welcome to Speak Sex. I'm your host, Eurydice. I'm Greek from the island of Lesbos, where the lesbians come from. I am the writer. I'm the writer of 3 books on female sexuality: Satyricon USA, published by Scribner, F32, published by Virago Press. I wrote the Sex Files column for Gear magazine. I was a staff writer on sex for Spin magazine. I've been a sex expert on talk shows and TV shows, as well as a multimedia artist with, I think, female sexuality, objectification, and the dichotomy between our bodies and our minds, and finding ways to bridge it. The reason for this podcast is that I have felt that with the advent of Metoo and confessional, memoir, social media, there has been even DNA testing, genetic testing. There is suddenly right now an opening for us to change our ancient, repressive, needlessly shaming sexual habits. And so in order to bring the body into the light, we're here every Friday from 2 to 4. Today's guest is an ideal guest for this discussion of trying to find a non-binary sexual life and how to lead it. George Lopez, he's an artist here in Miami at the moment, but he's a global citizen, born in the Dominican Republic. He studied at the New School, and I know just from talking to him briefly that he's lived all over this country. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. So I know that you're not here to plug anything, but actually as a private citizen to share with us your truth and
experiences and truth and shed some light on, I guess, viewpoints of sexuality and sex and politics and how all those things merge and affect the mind and body.
Right. And how we might shift toward more acceptance and fewer no's and fewer fears, right?
No, yeah. I mean, there's so many people. I was just having a conversation earlier. So many people that live inhibited lives. That either do things in secrecy because they're ashamed of what they're doing. But in reality, there's no shame that should be attached to whatever it is they're doing if it isn't harming anyone else and it's bringing them pleasure. But of course, it's dependent on how they grew up, societal expectations and all that.
We all grew up repressed. I don't think there's really an exception, unless you even if you grew up in a commune, you must have been somewhat sexually repressed, because our traditional, assumed, given way of raising our young is by saying no. So the first thing you learn is, tiny toddler is no, don't do this, don't do that. And that's how you learn. Not by yes, but good girl, good boy, when you do not do what's a bad thing and what will people say. So those, and then that we attach shame to all things physical so fast.
Right.
So it's very hard to unlearn because, you've And it's not just the sex, even though sex is what we're speaking now because it's much more fundamental. But even, you know, issues of like anything that has to do with the body is supposed to be, you know, unspeakable.
Interestingly enough, though, I grew up with my family saying no, but I was someone of a deviant from a young age.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever they said no, I would do the opposite.
Oh, good.
I mean, I'll get my ass kicked, you know, and whooped, but it was sort of the
negative reinforcement.
but also the thrill of finding out why couldn't I do something? Why was I prohibited to do something? What would happen to me if I did it?
Right. How terrible could it be?
Right. How terrible could it be? Exactly.
And it wasn't.
It wasn't. It wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
But I also I grew up Catholic, and I mean I'm not Catholic anymore. Practicing Catholic. My spiritual beliefs are based in Eastern philosophy, but that took a lot of time, and a lot of peeling of the layers of who I am and who I wanted to become.
Right.
But initially, when I was, I guess, attracted to guys from a young age, and I went to Catholic school my whole life, and my high school was all boys school.
So of course you're attracted to the guys.
So I was attracted to.
They're right there.
They're right there, right?
Yeah.
And you know, and at that time, like at the age of 13, 14, 15, we would do some very homoerotic things together,
mm-hmm.
you know. But my interest always wanted to go further, you know, like sexually and explore. But you know, of course, some of these boys didn't want to, and some of them did.
Oh, so you did proposition? You actually went ahead and said, "Would you wanna play around?"
Well, I wasn't the one who propositioned, but I was sort of like lured into certain situations, which I took.
Okay.
These opportunities. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I'm gonna explore it, and
so there were more experienced boys who propositioned you.
Yeah, some of them were older.
Right.
I mean, I remember being, I think, 13, and one of them was like 16 or 17.
Mm-hmm.
But I enjoyed it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there was nothing. You know, if I said no, I'm not comfortable with this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they would stop, or they would say, "Oh, come on."
Mm-hmm.
But I said, "No, this
Mm-hmm.
this is my limit." But then it evolved. Like my sexuality evolved as I started getting older, started exploring different desires and different kinds of attractions, especially to women. When I was about between sort of like my formative teenage, early 20s, I had my first serious relationship of 2 years was with a guy in college at the new school. And at that time, I was hanging around a lot of gay men of color, and then I also had a heterosexual circle, you know, that I would sort of jump in and out of. And at the time, I didn't really feel comfortable, you know, finding my curiosity and my sexuality and exploring the
in a
woman,
bi way.
right? In a bi way, exploring
Mm-hmm.
the woman body. But as I got a little bit older, I decided to just go ahead and take the plunge and just start, you know, dating women, exploring with women, and I find myself really enjoying it and really loving the company and really exploring the female body. But it was interesting because prior to me being 25 and being in a relationship with a guy, and then me being in another relationship with a guy who was in the Nation of Islam, which is a whole different ball game, because you know they're very homophobic and very anti queer, you know.
So he was in the closet then.
Oh yeah.
Your boyfriend.
Yeah. No, this is the
Your
second
lover.
one. The second one, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So every time I expressed in that gay community that I had interest in women, they were like, "Oh no, why? That's so gross." You know, the you know. So I started getting
the vagina
yeah,
is so gross. Why you want to be face to face with one? Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So then, and then in heterosexual communities and circles, you know, they will be like, oh, if you sleep with a guy, you're gay, and that's what you are. Just admit it. You know, you're not bi. You just want to identify as bi because you want to be accepted into like somewhat of a
heterodominant.
Yeah, exactly, heterosexual role. So it's like, you know, whatever. I'm just gonna do what I feel is right for me, and compelled to do, and I don't have to explain myself to anyone. So that's what happened. So from 25 on, I was dating women.
Okay.
And
so I'm just gonna take a moment
before
I ask you about the first time you know, were sensual sexual with a woman.
Mm-hmm.
I just do want to say here that there is a long and esteemed tradition, which we now forget, in late 20th, early 21st century Western world, that the longest tradition of like 2,000 years or more, 3,000 years, is for the early education to be homosexual and homoerotic. So in ancient Greece, in ancient Rome, you know, even in England, you know, public education, public schools, you know, a lot of going away to school involved the two boys, or one boy and the older boy, having a sexual relationship as a rite of passage to adulthood.
Right.
And when, in the very rare occasions when women were educated, like briefly on the island of Lesbos, in the schools of Sappho, it was the same idea. It was never assumed that you know, that these boys, and again, of course, the girls, but the majority of the people going to school were the boys. So it was never assumed that they would not have wives, that they would not get married, that they would not have children. Quite opposite. It was kind of a way of male bonding. It was used actually for nationalist reasons sometimes, because these people would also eventually be soldiers, you know, in their youth after their schooling. So that bondage of like the emotional and physical connection was important. But also it was a way for them to learn sex. However, you know, strange maybe to us, that was their sex ed, and it was more real than nothing, which is what we get.
Right.
At least you got an idea of what the body looks like and what the penis does, and you know, it was something. So when you were like face to face with the infamous vagina that procreates, you had a sense of what you're doing and where you're going, instead of just like your first time knowing nothing, but just by virtue of being the boy and having the penis, you're supposed to know what to do, right? Which is what has been happening recently. So yeah, I think that in the effort to you know, validate queer rights, legal rights especially, which is important, and also in the backlash to the terrible, you know, loss of life during the AIDS crisis. You know, those lines were dug in the sand, but I think it should be temporary. You know, those battles have been fought, those victories have been won, and it's, you know, I mean, bisexuality should be equally accepted. It's part of LGBT. But yeah, right now there is still a lot of
it's funny because in the
stigma.
80s and 90s, you mentioned AIDS and HIV, I was, because I had grown up in the Catholic Church, and because I had these homoerotic thoughts in my mind, I automatically thought that I was going to die of AIDS. I was just like, holy shit, you know, all these guys are doing this thing that I want to explore, but they're all dying.
Yeah, it's gonna kill you.
And I'm gonna
die. Kill you. You're gonna go to hell.
Yeah.
And there won't be 71 virgins.
Wrong guy. Waiting for me.
Yeah. No, that's the Nation of Islam, dude.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt, I mean, for me, that was also, everything changed, you know, because until then, those rules weren't really happening. You know, everybody could sleep with everyone. I felt, in my experience, I mean, I was in New York, yes, you know, in the East Village, so it was kind of a very particular, small community. But within that community, until the AIDS, you know, I don't know what to call, Holocaust began, there was constant exchange. So queer men slept with straight women, and straight women slept with queer women all the time.
Right.
And we didn't think about it, and it was just trying things out. And then you had like an umbrella identity for people who really, you didn't want them to know your private business, but you had to say something. And usually the women that I was part of would say that they were lesbian, but for political reasons. It didn't mean that they wouldn't sleep with other women, with boys or men. Sometimes they would date exclusively boys for a period of time. But overall, they were lesbians, had long lesbian relationships, and that's how I identify it from a feminist point of view. So all of that was crushed. First of all, yes, a lot of women weren't so eager to sleep with queer men, especially in the beginning when people were dying and no one knew why. And so there was that retrenchment. But I think it was much more powerful within the gay men community, because they were attacked from everywhere. So they just had to like join ranks, and unite and hold each other's hand and say, this is who we are, we're here.
Right.
We gotta like defend our own, and you can't. So it's like wartime, and things change during war because you have huge other emergencies. But we're long past that, so we can like go back to something much more, I think, inclusive. So anyway, so when was the first time that you went? I'm not gonna say down on a girl. I'm gonna say out with a girl. And how was that?
It was interesting because by the time it happened, I felt like I was old. I was in I think I was like 25, 26, around there.
Yeah.
And, coming from the Dominican Republic, we have sex early.
Mm-hmm.
Like, by 14, if you say, oh, I had sex with fulanito, like with Maria, like, oh, okay, whatever. It's like in the Caribbean island, I mean, there's not much to do. But,
Yes,
but playing baseball, we
Yes.
didn't have sex.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's very... and then that's why I felt like, okay,
It's mainstream.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, but it was good. I just, I didn't tell the girl that I was.
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
That was my first time.
Okay, so you acted like a pro.
I think there was some awkwardness at the beginning, but because a pro I was not. So
But she didn't know.
She didn't know. She
okay.
didn't know. And, I guess it was good. I mean, she called me back, she's like, let's hang out some more. So it wasn't something that I was like really surprised by or taken aback by, or like it kind of happened naturally. And I just
So you didn't have an identity crisis afterward. You didn't.
No, I think when I spoke to people about my experience, they had more of an identity crisis for me
on your behalf.
On my behalf than I did myself. And I think even I'm very open with my family and with my mom. So when I would bring guys home, like she got used to and then I would bring girls home, and then she was like really confused. She was like, okay,
Like,
what's going on? I mean, but then she was just like, and then I remember a few years ago, she came to visit me here in Miami, and this was probably like around 2012. And I was single. I had broken up. I had been dating a girl for about 2 years, and we broke up. And I was single for a while, and she was like, oh, I just want to tell you that I don't really care who you're with the guy or girl. I just don't want you to be alone.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, that's really sweet of you, Mom. And she was like, yeah, I've grown. Because at first, when I brought in college the guy that I was dating, she totally freaked out. She's like, how could you? But you don't really, you don't act gay, you don't look gay. I was like, what does that even mean? I mean, no one really, just you have the stereotypical, gay figure in your mind, and because I'm not that doesn't mean that I am not that, So
Yeah, that's another one of those cliches, just like what we were talking about before.
Right,
That
right.
there is, at least the culture, the dominant culture, the hetero dominant culture has this idea. So if you don't present that idea of queerness, like Queer Eye,
Right.
they present that way. And even, so it's the straight population, has again, has to also kind of like be enlightened and educated
Oh,
as to
definitely.
there are many more people who are gay, who look like, you and your brother and your, boss and that's just, how it is. And probably if you look really deep, you may have that bi curiosity yourself. You may want to like have a guy with your like wife once and see what happens.
That'll be awesome.
Right? I mean, I think if people were, more open and honest with themselves, they would totally be as bi-curious with both genders.
Right. Now, and I was also questioning I saw some post, I think on Facebook or some social media where there's this Dominican singer who's popular now who made gay porn.
Oh, wow.
In the past, I guess as a livelihood or whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
Could be because he enjoyed it. I'm not sure. I don't know him. But he now says that he isn't gay. He did it, for monetary reasons or whatever, what have you. And then people already said, "Oh, how can you do gay porn and not be gay? You're gay. You're gay. You're gay." So then I started questioning. I said, why can't someone let them identify however they want to identify? If they're not gay, and just because they have gay sex, doesn't mean they're gay. It could be, there's so much. The spectrum is so vast. So vast that
we don't even have names for the spectrum.
Exactly.
Like the S&M community have names for their spectrum.
No.
We don't. No idea.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But also I think in that, on that topic, if there weren't these definitions, these like super limited definitions of masculinity and how that fits within queer identity, a lot more men would be open to their bisexual, desires in nature without being paranoid that, I don't appear masculine, I lose my masculine, attraction in front of women or everybody else. If I come out and admit that I've been with men, that's not true at all. Everybody has like their own physical and sexual charisma and pheromonal,
Of course. No, and
identity, and it doesn't change no matter who they've been with.
When I started dating women and I disclosed that I've been with guys before, that I'm in fact bisexual, etc., they appreciate more the honesty as opposed to me going out there and doing whatever I want behind them and lying to them or living a double life.
Exactly.
And I think that the women, even some of the women who are sort of very heterosexual in their principle, sort of open up because of the truth being spoken. And I think women in general, correct me if I'm wrong, are attracted to that, attracted to truth, attracted to sort of because they're so not used to it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. No, women are attracted exactly to, the ability of the queer guy to be sensitive, to talk about feelings, to introspect. And it's sad that the culture has repressed men so much that they cannot, speak their feelings and access them sometimes. And they think that makes them like a stronger, more potent male. I mean, that's just insane, the amount of repression there, And I also imagine that sexually, a girlfriend will ask you, "Oh, what do you do with the guys? When you're with a guy, what do you do in bed?" And then maybe say, "We should do that." So it makes the sex much more varied, than it
Right.
would be otherwise, because she may want to try to replicate that out of some, curiosity, for fun, for adventure. So that too, I think, would be a great plus.
No, definitely. I mean, I just met this lovely lady during Art Basel, and we were connected on Facebook. She lives in New York, and we connected like in 2011. We never had met before. So then she sent me a message, and she said, "Oh, I'm coming to Miami for Art Basel. Let's have lunch." I said, "Yeah, let's do it." So, and then we had lunch. It was great, and I think a few days later, we went to an event. I said, "Hey, we've been drinking." I said, "Would you like to come back to my house?" And then I told her what I wanted to do with her sexually. She said,
Good. Oh my God, I want to stop. Stop right there. That's like half the purpose of this podcast. Is learning how to talk about what we want to do to each other before we do it, which people don't really practice. Okay. So you said to her, "Can you give us an example in quotes, please?"
Yes, of course. We were at the Faina Theater watching a drag show or something.
Yeah, I remember. I went to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Yeah. So then, she was sitting next to me, and we were drinking. I said, "I would love for you to come to my house. I really want to eat your pussy." And she said, "Okay, let's do it."
That was a full description.
That was a full description.
Sweet.
And then I didn't drive because it was the traffic was crazy at the time.
Yeah.
So we took an Uber back, and we got to my house about 2 in the morning, and we stayed up until 5 in the morning.
Nice. So you didn't verbalize everything else.
No, I just said I really want to eat your pussy, and then she said,
one thing led to another.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I really like it when everything is discussed. I mean, there is room for some spontaneity, but I really think it's very empowering, especially for the woman. If she can say, "I want this and this and this," would you be interested in naming it and changing what is being named? And that has the added bonus of immediate consent, because if it's something she's asking for, there is the consent that's necessary, verbal, right? So you cannot then later say, "No, I didn't want that. He took my head and shoved it on his penis or something." Yeah. It comes from her. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and it's also, it depends on the person as well, because not everyone you can be so forthright with.
Well, you can.
I mean, you can, but then there's some like,
if they say no, they say no. Right?
I mean, yeah, but there's some women that are so conservative that get repulsed by even that question,
Yeah.
Or that thought, So anyway, we went back
That's
to my
sad.
house. We went back to my house.
That is sad.
It's very sad. But we went back to my house, and we had a good time. She went to New York, back to New York. That's where she lives. She said, "Oh, I had a good time," and then she asked me via text. She said, "Is there anything that you want to do next time that I'm in town?" I said, "Yeah, we should have sex with other people together, with more people together, and I can introduce some dildos into." And she said, "Sure, let's do it." So it kind of took me by surprise, because I didn't really expect that response for her to be so open. But
That's great.
I guess I mean, she's a curator. She's an artist. So I think there's more tendency to be open. But I mean, I know some conservative artists as well who are like, I can't do that. But it turned out really well. I mean, it's kind of sucks that she's
They're not here.
Yeah, 2,000
right now.
miles away, but it's okay.
On the mic with us.
Right.
To tell us her side. Yeah.
You can phone a friend.
Yeah. But I think that's like one of the reasons we come here and say this stuff, to take that whole shame out of it. If someone asks you for something specific, or if you want something specific, you should be able to say it. And it's much better than, the fear of words. And I feel that's really not sex friendly at all.
Right.
But outside that, it seems that it can be too strident, so it leaves both men, it leaves mostly men in the dark, but I think it also leaves women in the dark in the sense of, you know, how much do I have to say, you know, how much do I spell out, how much do I say no, when do I introduce my own desire into it. You know, one of the problems is that women, you know, the mating scenario or the conquest of the female, all that bullshit, you know, is based on the male overcoming the woman's, you know, rejection or shyness or modesty or denial, and it's all self-defeating bullshit again, because it leads to like date rape. It leads to a place where, you know, the other side, the rapist, the assaulter, can claim, I wasn't sure, I didn't read her rights. You know, she didn't, it seemed like she didn't say it clearly enough. I thought it was consensual.
I was reading her body language and it was saying something totally different.
Right. So, you know, and again, and on the other hand, the women, you know, can be so paranoid that like something that would not be harassing or offensive, you know, like they're dressed and there is just some minor gesture that doesn't involve any genitals, of course. You know, again, can make them feel like they have to stand up and say something because maybe it has violated their space. So yeah, I want your opinion on that. And I, you know, because I think it's important that doesn't go too fast. You know, America has a tendency for puritanism.
Right.
You're not a born American, as I am not either. So we can see that more clearly, that they take a thing, it's beautiful, and then they start like going too far with it, and it becomes a tyranny again before you know it. You know. And it doesn't matter if the tyranny and the censorship comes from the left or comes from the right. You know, they meet. The extremes always meet in the end. You know, so if it's socialism or fascism or communism, they meet at some place. So, you know, it's important to allow freedom of sexual expression within that, you know, the very, very important Me Too movement.
Right. Well, I mean, I'll tell you a story that happened not recent, but fairly recent, about a year ago. I was in New York visiting my family, and I got together with my ex, and he from college. So we dated like almost 20 years ago. So he brought one of his girlfriends who went to college with us we went to see a mutual friend singer perform, and then we went to a bar to have some drinks. I got a little, you know, we all started drinking, we got a little tipsy, we were feeling nice, and I slapped her in the ass, and I think maybe like grabbed her by her hair, like not hard, but like playfully, you know, and she freaked out. She said, how could you do this to me? I didn't give her permission to touch me, and she stormed out. And I said, oh man, I'm really sorry. I apologized to my ex. I said, you know, please tell her that I'm sorry. I was totally embarrassed, and she wouldn't really accept my apology. And then until a few days later, he texted me, and then he said, oh, she's gonna be okay, don't worry about it. And I said, oh. Then I started speaking to some of my friends who are in academia, and you know, because my whole question to myself was, as a pro-feminist man, where does that line is drawn, where you're having fun and you slap a girl in the ass who isn't a stranger, someone that you know from college, but who you haven't seen in years, you know. So for her, when my action triggered some past sexual assault, which I wasn't aware of, and you know, I just started asking myself, you know, I guess ideally the thing to do is not to put your hand on someone else, you know, but since we were having fun and I thought it was just a good time, I just did it, you know, out of impulse, and we don't really, she doesn't speak to me anymore because of it. Well, I mean, we never spoke before or anything, but I tried reaching out, and I was gonna send her flowers and et cetera, and really want to get together so I can apologize face to face. but she didn't want to hear it. So then my question was to me, as because in college, we're all part of like a queer circle, so even in queerness, there are patriarchal behaviors and practices that you can express, even though you think you are respectful of women or feminist, or like theoretically, right?
Right. But if a girl, like if she had slapped your ass, you wouldn't have cared. If you noticed, you
Right.
hadn't cared.
Right. I would have loved
Right.
it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I think that's another problem right here, that women have to get to a place. We women have to get to a place where we can be the instigators of sex, and I think that by having gained verbal consent for the first time in history,
Right.
the written history that we now have that opportunity. We can initiate sex, we can say what we want, and it feels good. I think that if women try it out more and are not stuck in this idea, no, I want to be taken care of, I want to be the princess, I want everything done to me. No, babe, that's what that's what you're familiar. I mean, if that's your sexual preference, and you are a bottom of any kind and you're submissive, yes, absolutely. But if you're just heteronormal and it's that you've seen all the movies and, the bride gets carried over the threshold, and in all the Disney princesses, the prince shows up and takes charge.
It's such a learned expectation, because
Right.
you're always waiting for the guy to make the first move.
Uh-huh.
Whether it's to ask you on a date, whether it's to propose to you, whether it's to initiate sex. You're always waiting for the dude to just make that first move.
Which is self-defeating, I think. There's nothing empowering and feminist about that.
Right.
And but I still think it's tied into this whole concept of romantic love and possessive romantic love, right? Monogamous romantic love, because at that moment, the initial contact, finally, we're in like one of a couple generations only where we get to like make our own choices, and they're not made by our parents, right? So as we look around for our choices, at that moment of initial contact, there is no love. There can be no love. It's just a matter of chemistry, chemical, sexual desire
and lust,
and
right.
curiosity, lust. So, but the woman expects to hear love as if it were possible, So, because it's like this brainwash that if you're not loved, you're a slut, or
Right.
you're too easy, and then you're not going to be respected. And I don't think that one thing has anything to do with the other. You can earn the man's or your lover's respect, and when you take charge, you gain respect immediately. And I don't mean take charge in the bedroom where you can do whatever you like and the two of you can negotiate, but in
Right.
that initiation process, that first step, instead of waiting to be selected, like a flower, you get picked off the the garden, you can do the selecting too. And if the answer is no, it's not a rejection, because at this moment, the beginning, neither knows each other, so it's not personal. Like if you overcome your own whatever inhibitions and you go and ask a girl out,
Right.
that it's like 50-50 chance, but it's not personal because she doesn't know anything about you. I mean, she knows so little about you that it's not emotional, it's not really, it's so arbitrary. It could be about a million different things which really you shouldn't think about. You just, try again.
Right.
And,
right.
and not take it like so much as a judgment on your character, your looks, because it's not.
And then speaking of judgment, I mean, there's some guys who ask women, "Oh, how many people have you been with?" As if to sort of determine what kind of person they are. A judgment of character. So if they slept with, 2 guys, oh, then you're okay. But if you slept with 20 or 200, then you're worn out, or you're not. You're loose.
Right.
So, I mean, there's this expectation that from a male standpoint that women have to be this sort of like delicate princess. That's the waiting for them and only them.
Right. So I mean, I've heard many stories, where the girl would be like, well, I'm not interested in only sex, and when I hear that, I say, but you're interested in what begins with only sex,
Right.
and then if more and more connections come up between you, it can develop into a relationship, and then if many more connections, it can develop into a lifelong relationship. I don't know, but the issue is at this moment right now, neither really can tell. I mean, I think that even the guys who out of probably protection, in self-defense, to appear, again, more tough and not vulnerable, because men are trained to do that. They may say, well, I'm just out for sex, or it could be someone who just had a breakup and they're really hurt. They have PTSD, they have psychic trauma. They really don't think that they have it in them to commit emotionally. But in the process, they may fall in love, or they may decide that there is so much beautiful intimacy that they take the next step. These things happen naturally. You can't just meet up a few times and before the sex, when sex comes up, simply say, well, I don't want to just have sex, I want promises of eternal tomorrows,
Yeah, it's so
a
bizarre.
promise will get broken because it's based on nothing at this stage.
It's so bizarre to me. I mean, I come from the school of thought that the more sex you have, the more experiences you have, the more you're ready to actually be in a more stable relationship with someone.
Right.
Because then you get to know yourself, you get to know your body, you know what you like, you know what you don't like. You get to explore different facets of you with different people, and then bring that totality to not necessarily the person you're going to be for the rest of your life, but different people who you may want to establish something more consistent, a little bit more permanent, for lack of a word, if you will, because of course nothing is permanent, but for a little bit more longevity.
Right, yeah.
I get to know and explore. I would never would desire to have sex with a virgin, because what is she going to do? What am I going to do with someone who hasn't really experienced, especially when there are two different levels of experience. When I've experienced so much, with different people, different genders, and you come and you haven't had an experience like.
Right, and you have to be the mentor.
Right.
Every day.
Right. Exactly.
All day.
Exactly.
I want to ask you a little bit about polyamory and monogamy, which is where I was going with my previous comment, which is, this idea that true love is shown by, full possession only. Well, of course, it's one of the ways it can be shown, but, the assumption that if you love someone, you can't desire anyone else, and how long does that last? And so what do you think about it?
Well, I always tell people the heart is capable of loving more than one person at a time, right? So for me, it's so weird, because I have so many guy friends, right, who either, I would say about, and I know a lot of people, out of all my guy friends, I would say maybe 2 are faithful to their girlfriends and wives, right? So they're not.
Oh wait, 2 out of how many? Like 20, 30, 50?
I'll say I'll bet about 20. 2 out of 20, right? Or 2 out of 30, right? Because then, but the whole apprehension is in not, having that kind of communication with your partner, with your spouse. So we're not in a society that nourishes that kind of truth.
Yeah.
That nourishes those kinds of possibilities, or that encourages those truths.
Right.
So
and doesn't encourage verbal communication,
exactly.
Negotiation, and it also assumes that especially the women will not have any of it, right? So they don't even try. They just keep the secrecy, the secretive aspect, of sex,
right,
that we had with our parents. They just repeat how they were with their parents, with their wives. So sad.
Yeah, and the reason why my relationship with this girl for 2 years, my most recent one, dissolved, is because I told her, I said I wanted to see other people. So I gave her the option of either continuing the relationship with us seeing other people, or just parting ways. And then we ended up parting ways because she didn't want that. So
you would have been willing for her to see other people too, right?
of course,
Yeah.
I mean, that would have been
And
very
how would
selfish
you-
of me not to.
Right. And did you have a setup, like a definition of how that would work? Did you tell her, give her a way to imagine it?
Well, I told her, I said, one of the things that I wanted to explore is that if you and I are out at a bar and we see someone that we're attracted to, right? Like either a girl or a dude, like there shouldn't be any sort of insecurities or any apprehension in saying, hey, you want to come home with us for the night?
Okay, so that's a threesome. So that's not even really.
No, but that's sort of like it's polygamy in open relationship is the tree.
Polyamory.
Polyamory, not polygamy.
Not polygamy.
Yeah. Yes, polyamory. It's sort of like the tree, and then that's sort of the threesome is sort of like an extension of it.
Oh, really?
Like a branch, for me.
For you. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, but also it's I think my concept of, because I consider myself a non-monogamous person, but I think it's it's always evolving with the person that you're with.
Exactly.
And how you negotiate that, and if you want to change for that person, or if you don't want to change for that person,
Right.
or you can stick to your guns for the rest of your life, or are you willing to make adjustments
Right.
on how much, depending on how much you like that person. So there's a lot of variables.
Mm-hmm.
Different variables. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the way you said it is that by going together and picking up a third party together, a third
Right.
partner for group sex, then you would imagine that one of you would get more interested in the partner than the other and kind of go off and have your own thing with the blessing of the other main partner, that sort of thing.
Yeah, but we didn't even get that far.
Right.
Because as soon as I brought it up, she was just like,
Because some people find that it's easier to either have only threesomes, so one kind of like
everyone has to be present.
Yeah, but I mean,
Right.
everyone makes their own rules and compromises and agreements. But yeah, one of the most common for people to not feel threatened is that everyone is present and they're not allowed contact with that person outside the sex scene of the group. And then there is the totally different polyamory, like kind of classic, if I can call it that, polyamory, which is that each partner has more than one relationships, but doesn't talk about them, bring them, or introduce them. So again, very different from the polygamy people.
Yeah.
And again, in both instances, that's meant to reassure the long-term emotional partner to whom, the assumption is that you are emotionally committed to your long-term partner.
Right.
And that you do not intend to leave them,
Right.
and are like looking around for new supply or new game or whatever, newer versions of him or her. The problem is that in many cases it's only the guy who has this need. The women may not dare, they may not know how to go about it, again, because we've trained the man to be the hunter and the woman to be the prey, which is unfortunate. It should be the opposite by nature, naturally speaking.
Right.
It's the woman who is really the predator. She has longer orgasms, she needs more partners, she just needs to have as many as good, and the best, swimmer, it knocks her up, impregnates her. That's really where we're started with this. But yeah, the way that it's set up usually is that there is a control. So either whatever happens outside the couple stays out of the couple,
Mm-hmm.
Or that everything happens when everybody's present, and then there is no texting, no communicating, no calling. and if those rules get broken, then people start getting insecure, and wounded.
Yeah, I get really turned on by threesomes, but not everyone. Like for example, there's another girl that I met during the art season in December. She's from Egypt. It was her first time leaving Egypt.
Wow.
She came here to the Fountainhead residency as a resident. And we met. We went out. I took her to the strip club for the first time.
Madonna or where?
No, it's
Winterland.
the Bikini Bar. It's a small
Bikini Bar. I know Bikini
yeah,
Bar.
yeah. I love that.
Yeah,
place.
me too. It's up in the
Yeah,
neighborhood.
yeah, exactly. So I took her there, and she, and the women are more
Real.
not just more real, but they approach women more because they don't feel like men go there to like gawk and touch them, but they're more interactive with other women.
True, yeah.
So she loved it, and she started. She went there really shy. By the end of the night, she was like smacking ass, and it was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So we had a really good connection. We had some intimate moments, and then there was this guy that I was talking to at the same time, but they didn't have known each other. So I made the mistake of saying, "Let's hang out," and I'm gonna meet her, and then I'm gonna have him meet the both of us later on in the night. So that happened. So we all started drinking. We were out in Wynwood. I started like making out with both of them at Wood Tavern. And
so you were all sitting at the table then?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was like, she was sitting next to me. I was sitting on his lap, and she was sitting next to me. So we started making out. But then he like ended up liking me a lot. So he got kind of he didn't want threesome with a woman or with anyone, but she was open to it. So then that kind of, because I didn't communicate what I wanted to the both of them, I just sort of let like the drinks flow, and that are sort of like, I try to push it, not forcefully, but like, okay, we're kissing.
Lead the dance.
Right,
yeah.
exactly. So that it backfired because they both stopped talking to me because.
No way.
Yeah.
You didn't even sleep with a guy?
No. Yeah, exactly.
The worst story. Wait,
exactly, because
what did you do wrong? Say it again.
Because he felt like I was treating him like a piece of meat. Like I just throwing him into a threesome with a girl without him wanting it, And then she was like, she called me the next day. She was like, hey, I had such a good time. Let's do it again. But then they ran into each other again, and he told her like he liked me, and then she stopped talking to me too. So it all completely backfired. So like this whole dance that I was leading, it led to nowhere.
It's a terrible story, which makes no sense to me. But
yeah.
And that's only because you wanted to bring everybody together. Well,
because I'm trying to find that space where I can be like, I'm into threesomes, and are you down?
Yeah, well, you gotta say it. That's it. That's the whole thing about speaking it.
Right.
We gotta speak it. We gotta put it in the exact words so there isn't this like misunderstanding. Like I feel the same about a woman who's like been with a guy, and then suddenly she doesn't want to do it that time, but he doesn't read the no as no because they've just done it 50 times or whatever.
Right.
And she doesn't just say no, she just doesn't like squirm. She has to say, this is rape, this would be assault, this is assault, name the thing. So the same, like you have to say, I want to be with both of you. Is that okay with you guys? Do you want to like be with me together? And if it's not, okay, I'll be with one of you 2 days from now, and I'll go home with the other. But like you gotta speak it.
Yeah, you have to put it into practice. You just have to put
you
it
gotta
into
force
practice.
yourself to put it in words, and it's a little off-putting for everybody in the beginning. I was saying, I had, on another podcast, I had a doctor here, and I was saying how difficult it is, like, if someone has like put his hand up your ass or vice versa, and then you have to stop this passion and say, I gotta go wash, you have to go wash your hands. continue, you know. And it's like you're not supposed to be normal and real, you know. You're supposed to like be so swept away by these like overwhelming arrows that shot the arrow, you know,
Right,
and it's taking control of your, you know, common sense and logic and senses. But like that's self-defeating, you know. That makes us not quite, you know, conscious of what we do. And I think it's much better sex when we are conscious, and that's when we can actually like describe, you know, articulate compassionately what we would like, you know,
Right. And the
share
reason
it.
why we don't ask or speak it is because we're either too. I mean, I think it's mainly because we're afraid of what the answer may be.
Rejection, right?
Rejection,
Right.
right? So we always, you know, have that in the back of our minds, you know, and not really fulfill the fantasy or the goal.
Right.
you
True.
know,
No.
attain the
It's
goal. So,
it's my. I mean, like I always speak it, and I have to say honestly that half the times that it's a no, it's because the other party has been so fucking shocked that they just said what they said, that like I can see them shaking and climbing up, and their mouth is dry. It's like a physical expression of panic because it's the unknown. What did just happen here? I just said something very, you know, very basic, but the fact that out of nowhere I've shown up and said this is what I would like, it's easier for them to say no, because they're not ready to accept this whole shift. It's not to me so much as what's happening next, what she's gonna say next, what might she do next. Like this is not the norm, and you know, to me it just seems like the logical thing to do. And
I was
I'm showing by example. I'm thinking
about a month ago I was in Soho House and at the bar having drinks, and this couple comes up to me and just, you know, you're so handsome, oh, I like what you're wearing, I like your hat, you know, just like really coming on to me together. And you know, we just started chatting, and I was just like, you can ask me in my head, you can ask me to your room, ask me to your place, just do it. You know, like just enough of the compliments, just like, you know, don't be afraid of what my answer's gonna be. Either, you know, I would have gone, you know, there's really good, you know, really good looking couple. So, I mean, I would have went, but they just, I don't know if they were new at it or they were just starting to explore, but you can feel that they wanted it, but they didn't really know how to communicate it, other than just
and how often does that happen? So often, right? Where you know what the other person is thinking, you know what they want, they're not going to come out to say it,
right.
And either you're going to say it and put yourself out on a limb, which, you know, I try to do as a matter of principle, even more than desire, just like say the thing and see what happens. You know, it's like part of my field research. Or, but it is really, like a lot of it is like anthropological lab 101. What are they going to say? But if no one says it, then the moment is lost. And and both sides know, right? And we definitely have many more moments lost in our repertoire than moments enjoyed together with people.
I agree totally.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know, it's all a process of learning mostly yourself, you know, how you're going to ask people for what it is that you want, you know,
right.
Whether in a public setting or in a private setting.
Well, and I think it just takes practice. I think that the important thing here is, you know, like even like practicing it with your friends, you know, talking about sex more with your friends helps, right?
Right.
Even like practicing it on your way there, or when you meet someone, like go to the bathroom and repeat it so you know exactly what it is you have to say. You know, it's like learning a foreign language. We don't have the skill for that, you know, sex negotiation language. We just gotta practice it, you know, and take your chances. Tell yourself it's like speaking Spanish, it's like speaking French, it's like, you know, I mean, like you and I are speaking a foreign language. We're doing it now without thinking about it, but in the beginning there was always a process of translation. And that's, I think, what it is. It's like translating what you want in the words that, you know, seem more understandable, but just taking the risk and doing it. And I think it'll change everybody's life, you know, sex life, for sure.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Anyway. Anyway, well, thank you for coming.
Thank you for
Thank you
having
for
me.
sharing. It was a
Of
great
course.
conversation.
Yes, it
Come
was.
back.
Yeah, anytime.
And thank you for listening. I am Eve Sykes. I'm the host. No, I am here.
You're Eve Sykes?
I am. I want to be. I'm Eve Eurydice. I'm here with Speak Sex, and I'll see you next Friday. Ciao.
Okay, ciao.
I'm Eve Sykes. Oh my God, I just gave myself the worst nickname.
Eve Sykes.